feeling under the weather.
Yeah, feeling under MJ's spell. NBA Finals 2-2. First it got personal, then it got squeamish. Maybe it was an innocent question from Michael Jordan. Is it Byron or Brian Russell? But it drew Russell's fire. Brian responding, is it Michael or Michelle? Ooh. Now, on the one hand, you got to give Brian props for not backing down, but on the other, yo, B, that's Mike. I mean, Jeff Van Gundy called him a con man, and MJ lit up the Knicks for 51. But before Russell could get a crack at Jordan, the flu hit Michael before Game 5. Maybe it was takeout food. The Bulls' Park City dwelling in Utah does not have room service. But at 5:10 Utah time, Michael got to the arena. A touch of the flu after sleeping all day. No doubt, though, the four-time Finals MVP would start. As for his teammates, well, how about a wake-up call? Steve Kerr, Tony Kukoc in the back with the pass. One of 8 Bull turnovers. Howard Isley swiping it to Chris Morris. Give him the hoop, the harm, give him 11 points. Jazz up 14. Phil Jackson needs a hug. Scotty tried to pick up the slack. An ill facial on the mailman. Must be jelly, because Jam don't shake like that. Scotty, 17 points, 10 boards, but with MJ on the bench, Bulls down 13 after 1 in the second. Michael blowing up. Ron Harper the steal to Jordan, who tells Hornacek, peace. Mike had 17 in the second quarter. Then vintage Jordan, the misdemeanor steal, one of 3 steals he had. Sick dribbling behind his back to Pippen. Pippen, no, Michael. Oh, yeah. Jordan had 7 rebounds, 21 in the first half. Seconds up in the second quarter, Brian Russell out-rocked the party that rocks your body. He had 11 points. He also had 3 threes. Jazz go locker room up 4. Third quarter, great Jazz movement. Malone to Antoine, Carl backdoor to Stockton. Carl had 6 assists. Michael in the third quarter, an ice pack, only 5 total points in the 3 third quarters in Utah. But in the fourth, Jazz up 3. Jordan, Trey, money. He came into 17% from 3-land in the playoffs. Game tied at 77. After the whistle, Jordan on the bench looking absolutely ill, and I'm not talking ill as in good. Minutes later, though, Jordan tips Russell. Hey, yo, it's Michael, not Michelle. He had in the fourth. Has none. Luke Stockton from almost the same spot, 3 and 4. He had 13. Jazz by 3. Late fourth, Utah 1. Malone. Air balls the Jays. Just 7 of 17 shooting. Jazz would have been up 3. Michael trying to hit the second free throw. Does not. But Jordan sick and everything, fights for the rebound. Out to Pippen. Pip to Mike. Michael, can't you see? Sometimes your threes just hypnotize me. Despite being sick and not being able to walk, Mike had 38 points. 17 seconds left. They got the dunk. Still, though, not enough. Karl Malone with 5 fouls. Cannot foul Pippen. Pippen ahead. Nice touch pass, Kukoc to Luke Longley. Bulls up 3. Utah down 3. Michael not even beginning to walk. No on the 3. Stockton with the ball. Scotty, very intelligent foul. Stockton shooting 85% from the free throw line in the playoffs. Misses it. Misses the first, effectively ending the game. Michael could barely put his arms up in the air. Unbelievable game by Michael Jordan. Bulls win it 90-88, take a 3-2 lead in the series. Jazz 10-game home playoff winning streak over. Utah's 23-game winning streak overall at home over. Michael Jordan, 1 game after making Nike people scramble to retract the commercial because of his 27th chance to win a game and failing. Jordan barely walking, barely able to stand, does not fail in Game 5. His game-winning 3, his 38 points and 13 of 27 shooting, his 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 44 minutes played, all with the flu. One more chapter in Michael's legendary book.
What up? It's just afternoon. That means it's showtime right here on Phantom, Facebook's sports network. We're also really just the digital sports network for the world. A lot to get to today, but go check us out. We're on YouTube, youtube.com/Watch Phantom, facebook.com/Watch Phantom. Also broadcasting along with many of our great partners on Facebook, Big Game James, Jobu, Law Nation, Silver and Blue Nation, and the Dallas Prospects. Make sure to check out all those great pages on both Facebook and on YouTube as well. A lot to get to today, so let's get right to it. Oh, this thing?
Well, first question, Joe, on the left side, second row.
Joe VardenCleaning.com.
Yeah.
LeBron, we're just learning about your hand injury, and we can obviously see the break. Can you take us through what happened and if it caused you any problems over the final 3 games?
what happened, self-inflicted, post-game after game one. Very emotional. For a lot of different reasons, and how important the game one is for our ball up. What would that do us? The way we played, the calls that was made throughout the game, and that emotion, game away from emotions of, you just don't get an opportunity like this on the road versus Golden State to be able to get a game one. And, I let the emotions get the best of me and pretty much played the last 3 games with a broken hand. So that's what it is.
Apologies. All right, so there's LeBron James with his broken hand, making excuses, I guess. So they get swept. The Cavs get swept in 4 games. Then he goes to the post-game press conference with the cast, and he's like, "Oh, this thing? Oh, yeah." Punched a whiteboard after game 1 and just decided, now to wear this cast to the post-game press conference today. I mean, the previous 3 games that I played with it, couldn't wear a cast. I didn't obviously want to give Golden State any advantage knowing that I had a broken hand. So, I'm going to wear the cast today and let everybody know that I just played 3 straight finals games with a broken wrist, with a broken hand. That I broke, punching a whiteboard because I was so frustrated after game 1. We blew that game. We had a chance in that game. We blew it, and I was pissed off. I was upset. LeBron James is great. LeBron James is great, but he's just the perfect millennial superstar. And I say this being the exact same age as LeBron James, but he's just everything that people hate about millennials. The one thing, though, that I will say is he's a ridiculously hard worker, which a lot of people don't think millennials are hard workers. I've always thought that was a ridiculous notion. Like, if you want to be successful in life, you have to be a hard worker. It doesn't really matter how old you are, what age group you're in. Like, every different, whether you're a Gen Xer, whether you're a millennial, whatever you are, if you want to be successful in this world, in life, you have to work really hard. It doesn't really matter. So the idea that, millennials don't want to work hard, sure, I'm sure there are a lot of millennials that don't want to work hard. Good luck being successful at anything in life. But LeBron James, with the excuses and the passive-aggressive, subtweeting folks on Instagram and Twitter and on social media, it's just, I'm so fatigued by it. I started off this show today with clips of Michael Jordan in the flu game, and then move into LeBron James going to the podium after game 4 where his team gets swept, wearing a cast, talking about how difficult it was for him to play the final 4 games of the series, the final 3 games of the series with a broken hand. This is just a no excuses kind of business. David Alondre on the Ari Temkin radio page says, "You found the right video." I found the right video today. I learned my lesson from the last time. John Price on the Law Nation page says, "What's up?" He also says, "So you really think Earl Thomas will be a Cowboy this season?" Yeah, I want to get into that coming up here. That's the big story today. I think we are moving closer and closer to Earl Thomas being a member of the Dallas Cowboys. But I did want to start off by ranting on a few other things as well as we get started. Patrick O'Brien in the house. Broken hand excuses. He played good for having a broken hand. Now LeBron finally know what it's like to go up against the super team. Yeah, he played well, but I don't need the excuses. That's the thing is if you want credit for playing well despite having a broken hand, then tell me right up front that you had a broken hand. Not this passive-aggressive this little cast that I walked out with. It so fits the brand of LeBron that is, has this passive-aggressive sort of, I'll never forget, he subtweeted Kevin Love, and he's done that with teammates in the past, and then he'll go on Instagram, post a picture of the team, be like, well, but say something that's passive aggressive to Kevin Love, and then a year later he's out in media I would never, if I have something to say to somebody, I'll say it to their face. No, you don't. You never do that. And just this I hate this. Oh, here's my cast. Let me talk about how I played with a broken hand. Great. First of all, you did it to yourself by punching a whiteboard, So, like, you get the Darwin Award for being stupid and doing something stupid. You're not going to get credit then for toughing it out and playing 3 more games in a series with a broken hand. And by the way, when you play as many games as you played or the rest of the league play, like, everybody has maladies and issues and injuries and things they're trying to get through. God, he's just such a... I mean, here's a guy that went to the Cavs simply because he wanted to be able to pick his own team. Like, he didn't have any of the power in Cleveland the first time, and we saw the jokers that they put around LeBron the first time. Then he goes to Miami, he has some of the power, but Pat Riley's running the show, so he can't have ultimate power. So he decides to go back to Cleveland where he was given ultimate power. Dan Gilbert was like, you can do whatever you want, make whatever trades you want, you have ultimate power. And then he overpays Tristan Thompson, he makes a boneheaded trade, Andrew Wiggins for Kevin Love, because he's too short-sighted to see that Andrew Wiggins would become a better, a really good defensive player and a pretty good offensive piece as a complimentary guy. Like, he just makes all of these stupid moves and is completely unwilling to shoulder any of the blame for the subsequent stupid moves. And now everybody wants to give him credit for, like, being the best player on a shitty team that he compiled. And now he walks out with a fucking cast. Sorry for the language. Now he walks out with a cast on his hand, and he's trying to make more excuses about, well, yeah, I got this cast now after I broke my wrist weeks ago, or rather, a week or so ago after Game 1 when I was pissed off and I punched a whiteboard, but now I've decided to wear a cast on it after Game 4? Why? Oh, the reason he did that was because he didn't want to give Golden State any advantage knowing he had a broken wrist? Was that it? Is that? But I mean, you still were playing with a broken wrist. So if they knew or if they didn't know, you were still playing with a broken wrist. So it was going to impact the way you played. It's just And yet, here's the best part about it, in my opinion. So Golden State wins the championship, and they didn't even celebrate. It was the most amazing thing. They win the championship, and they're out there shaking hands. By the way, LeBron immediately walked off the floor, which I know. Spare me. He shook hands with people on the floor as he was, with 4 minutes left in the game when he got his curtain call. So he didn't have to stick around. He didn't want to make it about him. LeBron wasn't about to stick around after Golden State won their title and make it about LeBron. I mean, he did the right thing. Walked off the floor immediately. Didn't have to shake hands because he already did it. He did it prior to. He took care of all the folks already and already shook hands. No big deal at all. But I mean, Millie Lev in the house. Hi, Millie Lev. Andy Gooden watching. What up, Andy? How are you? My wife is also watching. Hi, wife. How are you? Post your comments. The hat's crooked. Thank you. Let me make sure it's a little bit more crooked. Thank you, Jeremy. By the way, hit the share button if you wouldn't mind, and also make sure to go to YouTube and like us on YouTube. Because 2 people are watching YouTube. What up? Post your comments and make sure to join the show on YouTube as well as Facebook every single day as we simulcast on YouTube at YouTube.com/Watch Phantom, or just search Watch Phantom on YouTube and find us there and subscribe to the page. All right. So LeBron does his thing where he shakes hands with the guys with 4 minutes to go in the game when he gets his curtain call, and then walks off the floor and then leaves. But Golden State, they didn't even really celebrate. It was the most amazing thing to see. It was like a foregone conclusion they were going to win the finals this year. That's how scripted the NBA playoffs seemingly were. But it's not even about nobody's even made mention of the Warriors. Immediately after the finals ends, it's all about well, where's LeBron going to end up? Where's LeBron going to go? It was just this amazing thing to see and continue to happen where nobody's talking about Golden State even after they've won a championship, which I think is fantastic. And then I see this on Twitter. Which, by the way, who isn't interested in acquiring Anthony Davis? I get it. I get it, Bleacher Report. This story by Tim Kawakami, who's fantastic, is more than just the Warriors are interested in it, but literally every team in the NBA is interested in acquiring Anthony Davis. So, and I'm going to get to Earl Thomas and the Cowboys coming up, but the thing that I find funny is So people are obviously upset with the state of the NBA, if that's even the way to say it. Because here are the Golden State Warriors. They've just won 3 of 4 championships. It wasn't even entertaining. The finals weren't, because it was 4 straight, 2 good games, 2 blowouts, but a foregone conclusion from the start who was going to win the series, regardless of if Cleveland had won Game 1. And I think, nice. James D on YouTube says, Earl to Dallas, go. I'll get to there in a second, but I appreciate you joining us live on Phantom, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Sports Network. Make sure to like us wherever you're watching us. Make sure to hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching us. And make sure to also follow our great partners, Law Nation, Silver and Blue Nation, the Dallas Prospect, Joe Boo, and Big Game James. And thank you for letting me stream this on your pages as well. And I'll get to Earl Thomas and some of the things I've noticed from Cowboys OTAs as they sort of wrap up minicamp here momentarily. But what was I was saying about the NBA, like the NBA playoffs? That's the thing, is even though we knew it was going to happen, it didn't change the fact that there were entertaining aspects. Remember, Houston took Golden State to 7. We saw an up-and-coming Philadelphia squad. We saw an up-and-coming Boston squad. We saw Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown make a name for themselves nationally. Like, that's the thing, is you get to the end and you're like, oh, that sucked. But that doesn't mean the playoffs sucked as a whole. Just because we knew Golden State was going to win this thing from the start doesn't mean that the playoffs as a whole sucked. There were a lot of things that I think were interesting and important to note about the entire exercise of the playoffs. So, I don't know. For me, AD Singh in the house. Gabe Gonzalez, what up? Gabe Gonzalez out playing golf. I'll watch today in the future. Interesting. You can watch this on the golf course. Make sure to turn it up. Turn up as loud as it possibly can go while you're on the golf course. By the way, hit the share button, post your comments, join the conversation as we amble on here on Showtime every day at noon right here on Facebook and on YouTube. Again, even though it ended the way we figured it would end, the playoffs, we knew Golden State was going to win. That doesn't change the fact that it was interesting, that there were different interesting components of it, and that ultimately, again, we saw a Boston team, we saw a Philadelphia team coming to its own, so it looks like those are 2 teams that are going to match up, for a long, long time in the future of the NBA. Plus, again, Houston in a extremely fun series with Golden State in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. So not always lost, but obviously the biggest component for me, and Patrick O'Brien agrees, you pick those players. Shut up, Ron Brown. No, but I mean, he's just a guy that's completely unwilling to look in the mirror and make it and not make excuses for his performance. And the cast is just the latest thing. But Tone Hero 85 says that the beard has brought out this anger. It's awesome. The beard for which my anger is derived. Yes, he's watching on YouTube, by the way. Make sure to post your comments on YouTube as well. Subscribe to our YouTube page. Check us all out there as we try to build up all of these different pages and places for which to watch us. But yes, I derive my anger for LeBron James from the beard. This is like a month and a half, by the way. I don't know if it'll... I guess I'm kind of trying to go for LeBron and James Harden. And Harden maybe more... I'd like to see how big and thick it could get. That's what she said. But I think this might be it. I'm sad to report to all of you folks. But thank you, Tone Hero 85. Yes, so here's the other thing, too, is... The other thing about Golden State is, dominance is good for sports. And I think people often mistake this for something, right? Which is, UConn women's basketball is a great example of this. When UConn women's basketball wins 100 straight games, all of a sudden, people care about women's basketball. Why? Because people want to see dominance be taken down. People want to see it lose. So that's where, Golden State had to build up that dominance. They had to create that dynasty, if you will, by winning 3 of 4 before now the intrigue of, well, who's going to beat them? But, I mean, obviously you have to establish dominance itself. You have to win 100 straight games if you're UConn, or win 3 of 4 championships if you're Golden State to establish that dominance. So now the next would be... watching somebody beat them. And I think where LeBron goes, what other sort of superpowers that could be established based on, Anthony Davis go elsewhere, where, just those, what about Kawhi Leonard? Will he stay in San Antonio? Those kinds of things, that's the next thing to watch for. By the way, Tone Hero 85 is Gabriel. She says, don't go hipster, though. I won't. I just literally want to see how far I can get this thing going. All right, I'm Ari Temkin. This is Showtime every day at noon, right here on Phantom, whether you're watching us on Twitch, on YouTube, or Facebook. Thank you for watching us, and thank you for being a part of the show. I also, before we get to Earl Thomas and some of the things I've noticed, wanted to get to an interesting story that I found this weekend, and that was... So, a missing Air Force officer was found in California after vanishing 35 years ago. A high-ranking Kirtland Air Force Base officer with top security clearance who disappeared 35 years ago has been found in California. The Air Force Office of Special Investigations said in a news release this week that William Howard Hughes Jr., interesting name, was apprehended at his home after a fraud investigation involving a fake identity he had been using. Hughes, now 66, was involved in classified planning and analysis of NATO's control, command, and communications, blah, 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 blah. He was 33 years old and single when he vanished. He was last seen withdrawing more than $28,000 in Albuquerque in the summer of 1983 after returning from a 2-week vacation in Europe. An Office of Special Investigation spokeswoman told the Albuquerque Journal that there's no indication Hughes was involved in the Soviet Union or that any classified information was leaked. Hughes told authorities after his capture on Wednesday that he was depressed about being in the Air Force, decided to leave. He created a fake identity and lived in California ever since. Hughes was charged with desertion and is being held at Travis Air Force Base in California. It's an interesting story for a lot of different reasons. What I found maybe most interesting about this is how easy, okay, so he was top-level Air Force intelligence. So he had pretty good training and pretty good, he knew how to get away with this. The problem is he hasn't had that training in over 3 decades, so part of the reason he probably was apprehended was because of that. He just kind of, not to say he wasn't intelligent, he just, you can see how much the technologies have changed the world in the last 3 decades. I mean, my God, look at how much the technology changed the world in the last a decade or 5 years. So, it's kind of easy to see why he was finally captured after all these years, because the technology that he came up on and had the intent, he knew how to get away with this for a long time. The problem was there was a point in time where the technology far advanced past anything he had ever learned or mastered. And so it was this idea of, if you ever read about old-style bank robbers, you can read about, it seemed so easy to be able to rob banks back in the day. So easy to rob banks. And now it's ridiculously more difficult. And I think that's true with a lot of other crimes as well. It's just a lot more difficult to get away with crimes, especially even if you're really, really smart and you studied and, learned Air Force intelligence. To me, it's just kind of funny that, this guy sort of became just as stupid as everybody else when it came to committing crimes after all these years of not being a part of Air Force intelligence, and that obviously the technology exceeded far beyond anything he was ever capable of, and it's just funny now he's kind of blended in with everybody else, and now he got caught, and he's going to face some serious crimes of desertion, which is obviously a very, very serious crime. All right, so that was the last thing I want to get into. Let's get Cowboys talk going. I'm Ari Temkin. By the way, I have a Cowboys podcast. It comes out every Friday. Check it out. Subscribe on iTunes. Go check it out. Just search Cowboys Beat, and there you'll see it. On this week's episode, coming out on Friday morning, I'm going to have Brian Broaddus, former Dallas Cowboys scout, and current writer for DallasCowboys.com. Does a lot of great work. If you know the Cowboys, you know Brian Broaddus. He's going to be my guest on the Cowboys Beat podcast this week, so make sure to go subscribe on iTunes or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Just search Cowboys Beat and then find it, subscribe, rate it, help me grow and sustain this audience, as we're going to have great guests throughout the season. I look forward to doing that. All right, wherever you're watching, make sure to post your comments. To me, the big story of the day today is Earl Thomas, and I want to get to that here now, and that is, by the way, I wanted to just make sure everybody's getting all the comments. Ben Mandel in the house, Robert Allen Cole in the house, what up, what up, what up? Henry Munoz, Chris Garza, I made fun of LeBron, you missed it. Javier Ruiz, Victor Knappen, what up, Vic? How are you, buddy? What's going on with the Millie Lev says gotta go cook. You can cook and watch at the same time, Millie. Vic, how's the page going? Go check out Victor Knappen and the great page they have, Filthy in Philadelphia. Cowboys fans, I'm sure, would have a lot of fun with that page. But go check them out. They do great work and great stuff. Cool videos, great memes, funny stuff. Appreciate you watching, Vic. Shane Godwin on the Joe Boo says, time to get to Earl Thomas and Cowboys. My lunch break is only so long. LOL. All right, here we are. Okay, so the rumors started when the Cowboys lost to the Seahawks last year, and then these pictures, as you can see, were taken of Earl Thomas talking to Jason Garrett, and he talked, and if you follow this story, you know that Earl Thomas basically said to Jason Garrett, if you've got a chance, come and get me. Come and get me. I want to play for the Dallas Cowboys, which is freaking awesome if you're a Cowboys fan. But it sucks if you're a Seahawks fan, because he's obviously under contract with the Seahawks. He's still a really good, productive player for you. And the last thing that you want is for one of your favorite players and a legendary player to basically go to the other team and say, hey, come pick me up. I want to be on your team. So if you follow the timeline here, he does this. This obviously tickles the fancy of Cowboys fans everywhere. Everybody gets excited. The Cowboys think they're in, potentially, on Earl Thomas coming to the Cowboys. And then, to me, more than this, because he can say this and be happy with the Cowboys and talk about the Cowboys, but the bigger thing that happened that made me think that Earl Thomas was going to end up with the Cowboys was that he said that he was going to hold out, that he wanted a long-term deal, and that he was willing to hold out until he got that long-term deal. And he's doing it. It's happening. That's the thing is, so again, the Seahawks were like, okay, cool. Whatever. It's the offseason. We've got a lot of time to get this thing sorted out. You're still under contract with us. You don't have much leverage. So they went and probably called Stephen Jones, the Dallas Cowboys, and said, how about a first-round pick? We're not asking for much. Just a first-round pick, and you can take Earl Thomas off our hands. The Cowboys hung up immediately. Cowboys probably called back and said, first-round pick's ridiculous. Let's talk about a second-round pick. And the Seahawks were like, no. Earl Thomas is great. He's worthy of a first-round pick, nothing short of that. That's where the conversation stalled. Me, personally, I think a second-round pick is probably too much to be giving up for Earl Thomas. So I think the Cowboys probably stayed pretty firm on the second-round pick. I'm sure the Seahawks stayed firm on the first-round pick. As ridiculous as that is, you're not getting a first-round pick for Earl Thomas. First-round picks are worth their weight in gold. The only thing you're going to get as compensation for somebody's first-round pick is a higher first-round pick. That's the only thing that teams are willing to give up for first-round picks. So, of course, the Cowboys are going to pull. I think the Seahawks still thought Jerry was in charge and that they were going to make some sort of stupid move. And so, why not? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. You might as well ask for it. The Cowboys would have been stupid to give up a first-round pick. They were never going to give up a first-round pick. So they counter with a second-round pick, which, again, I wouldn't have given up a second-round pick either. I'd probably give him a third and say, that's all you're going to get. But that might just be me. John Price says, Ari, what's your Facebook page so I can follow? Check it out. Go to Ari Temkin Radio. Just search Ari Temkin, Aritemkin, Ari Temkin Radio, or just click on the link for Phantom. You'll find me there as well. A lot of places to get in touch. I appreciate that, John. Or just send me a friend request. You can do that too. Because I've got a personal page, a radio page, and Phantom page, and all that stuff. By the way, Joseph Brian Heron says DC4L, Dallas Cowboys for life, always. On the Silver and Blue Nation page and the Dallas Prospect page. Nothing doing there from a comment standpoint. Okay, so Earl Thomas, after the Cowboys lose to the Seahawks, and by the way, in a game that Jason Garrett probably should have been fired after, my God, was that a poorly coached game by Jason Garrett. They kicked 3 field goals in the first half despite 4 trips, I think, into the red zone. They had 9 points and were up at the half in that game and had 4 red zone trips and came away with 9 points. That can't happen anymore. You have to go for it more on 4th down and get more than 9 points and 4 red zone trips. That's beside the point. So the Cowboys lose that game. Earl Thomas talks about how much he wants to be with the Dallas Cowboys, then says later on he's going to hold out. The Cowboys and Seahawks engage in preliminary trade discussions that are not fruitful at all because, of course not, because of course the Cowboys are not going to be willing to give up a first-round pick for him. The draft comes around, and so according to multiple sources, the Cowboys had basically said, they'd earmarked, according to Mike Fisher of 105 Through the Fan, and also Fish, just a longtime Cowboys reporter. He said the Cowboys had earmarked a second-round pick for Earl Thomas. They thought, we're going into this draft knowing that we are going to give up a second-round pick for Earl Thomas if the Seahawks are interested. They're not going to give up their first, but they're going to give up their second. But I talked to Brian Broaddus about this, and again, the Cowboys beat with Ari Temkin coming out on Friday. I'll have an interview with Brian Broaddus. And Broaddus basically said, like, verified that, but then figured, and this isn't, didn't report this, but figured that when Connor Williams was still available with their second round pick, that the Cowboys felt like they would rather have Connor Williams than Earl Thomas. Which I agree with on multiple levels. I agree with that on multiple levels. Like, first and foremost, the Cowboys, when they were at their best a couple of years ago, had the best offensive line in football. But then they lost Doug Free at right tackle. Then they lost Ronald Leary at left guard. And, they moved Lyle Collins out to right tackle. And then they had just Jonathan Cooper, who at times played well at left guard. But they just had, they went from a great offensive line, the best offensive line in football by far, to, just an okay offensive line, which I think is a reason why they weren't as successful last year. Right, and Joe Deasy on the Phantom page is saying, I take O-line first. So here's the thing, is a lot of people had Connor Williams like as one of the top offensive line prospects in the draft. So the fact that he was available in the second round, like, first and foremost, if I'm the Cowboys, I'm never giving up a first or a second for Earl Thomas. That's just, Earl Thomas is great, but like, what the pick that's commensurate for where Earl Thomas is in his career is a third. And that's based on a lot of things. It's based on contract slotting for draft picks. It's just based on multiple factors. So, like, it didn't matter if it's Connor Williams or somebody else. I would never have given up a second-round pick. But I think the Cowboys were willing to until they realized that Connor Williams was available. And at that point, they weren't as willing to. So, they take Connor Williams, and maybe they went and offered the Seahawks a third for Earl Thomas. But at this point, again, the Seahawks don't necessarily think that they have to trade Earl Thomas because, again, they might think that he's bluffing a bit on actually holding out. So he doesn't go to any of the voluntary or the voluntary OTAs. If you don't know, in the NFL, there's 3 voluntary OTAs, and then the fourth week, which is this week, there's the mandatory minicamp. So there's a month of basically organized team activities for NFL teams, and then they have basically a month and a half off before training camp. So we are in the 4th week of the of OTAs, and this fourth one is the mandatory minicamp. You must be there if you are a member of that team. So Earl Thomas, in advance of the mandatory minicamp week, comes out and releases this little statement, which I've got courtesy of, which I've got courtesy of Mike Fisher from 105 Through the Fan. But here you go. So he tweeted this out. I will not be attending the upcoming minicamp or any team activities until my contract situation is resolved. I want everyone, especially the 12s, to know that I want to remain a Seahawk for the rest of my career, but I also believe that based on my production over the last 8 years, that I've earned the right to have this taken care of as soon as possible. I want to have certainty in regards to the upcoming years of my career. I'm going to continue to work my craft and put in work so that I can add to the team and give us the best chance to win. I hope my teammates understand where I'm coming from. I believe this is the right thing to do, E.T. And so Cowboy fans are like, it's on, it's happening. I think Earl Thomas is coming to the Dallas Cowboys. And I kind of maintained throughout the entire offseason, if he does hold out, then he's going to be on the Cowboys. Because the Seahawks, first of all, they've gutted their roster. They're not competing for a championship anymore. Right? Like, they hit on a lot of draft picks early on. They parlayed a dominant defense with a young quarterback that wasn't getting paid like an elite-level quarterback who was on a rookie contract. Sound familiar? They had Russell Wilson, a third-round pick, on a really, really cheap contract, which means they could spend their money elsewhere. So they drafted well with Richard Sherman and some of the other guys that were part of that Legion of Boom. They could spend money on Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman, or rather on Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas, because they didn't have to appropriate all that money to Russell Wilson. They paid, obviously, Marshawn Lynch a ton of money. So it was like, when you don't have to spend 25% of your salary cap on a quarterback, you have a lot more flexibility to be dominant. Well, obviously, the payday came around for Russell Wilson. Now he's getting paid like an elite-level quarterback. They had to gut their defense as a byproduct of that. So they don't really want Earl Thomas to be on their roster, and they're definitely not going to give him a long-term deal. Remember, Earl Thomas said he was going to hold out until he got a long-term deal. Well, the Seahawks aren't giving him a long-term deal. They're rebuilding. They are not going to be handing out millions of dollars on a guaranteed contract or guaranteed money to Earl Thomas when he's at the end of his career, or at least from their standpoint, he's at the end of his career. Let's see here. Justin Simmons is saying, so what's interesting. All right, so Justin Simmons and John Price on the Law Nation page going back and forth on Earl Thomas to the Cowboys. Justin Simmons started off by saying Earl isn't coming. Richard pretty much already said they have a lot of faith in our young guys. Well, of course that's what Richard said, because they hadn't traded for him yet. But, I mean, what was he going to say? Yeah, I mean, we're going to need a guy like Earl Thomas because, man, I just don't trust Xavier Woods to be our free safety, or I just don't trust this guy to be our free safety. Of course Richard's going to say that. But, I mean, at that point, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that Earl Thomas was going to be there. And, again, I maintained throughout this entire offseason, if Earl Thomas actually does hold out, which is what he said he was going to do. He said if he didn't get that long-term deal, he was going to hold out. So I said if that's true, if he does in fact end up holding out, he's going to be on the Cowboys because they're going to force the Seahawks' hand. Now maybe they continue to fine him and they just don't want to acquiesce and give in to the Cowboys. But I just find it hard to believe that a team that's rebuilding has a player that's unhappy, that's not showing up to mandatory minicamp, that's probably not going to show up to training camp, that they're not going to be willing to pick up the phone with the Cowboys and say, all right, let's get this deal done for a third-round pick. Now, my guess is Schneider picks up the phone and says, how about next year's second? And if I'm Stephen Jones, I'm like, no, the price has gone down now, and the price now is a third-round pick. Which, again, I maintain the entire time is the equitable compensation for Earl Thomas at this stage of his career. Earl Thomas is still a really, really, really good free safety, but at 29 years old, still looking for a lot of guaranteed money, that's just a tough pill to swallow if you're the Seattle Seahawks. And I think for the Cowboys, he obviously wants to play for the Cowboys. Would he have the same demands of, if he was traded to the Cowboys, would he be saying, well, I'm still going to hold out until I get a long-term deal? I don't think so. Maybe. But I think this has more to do with the fact that he wants to be with the Dallas Cowboys. Patrick O'Brien says on the Silver and Blue Nation page, it could have been Van Der Esch or Earl Thomas. Why would you have MLM? Like, I just think there is no way in hell you give up a first-round pick. Again, I thought no way you can give up a second-round pick because Earl Thomas, the value, what he's worth in compensation is a third-round pick, which is, if you're a team rebuilding, it's a pretty good deal to get for a 29-year-old who no longer fits into what you're trying to do if you're Seattle. They're rebuilding. So why, this gets them off the hook for, I think if they cut him, they're going to save $8.5 million against the cap. And they're going to, otherwise, if they have him on the books, he's going to make $10 million. Big Game James is now watching. What up, Big Game James? How are you, brother? Here's the thing. The Seahawks can release him and save $8.5 million against the cap. If they release him, they don't get jack bleep for him. So I mean, if you're the Cowboys, you call up and say, "We'll take him off your hands for a third-round pick." That way, you don't have to release him, and you can get something as compensation in return. And again, Earl Thomas clearly wants to play for the Cowboys, so maybe the Seahawks release him, and it's obvious that he wants to play for the Cowboys, so it works out in their favor. But my guess is he ends up getting traded to the Cowboys, and and obviously that's best case scenario would be he gets released, and the Cowboys then don't have to spend a third-round pick on him. But again, I just don't think. I think he's going to be on the Dallas Cowboys, and I think it's going to be this year because I don't see any way in which he is not continuing to live up to what he said he was going to, which is he's going to hold out until he gets a long-term deal. Earl Thomas doesn't want to be in Seattle anymore. He wants long-term security if he's going to be in Seattle anymore, and he's not going to get it because, of course, why would they give it to him? And so in lieu of that, he wants to be either released or traded because he doesn't want to be a part of a rebuilding roster that's gutted most of the best players on Legion of Boom. So, I mean, to me, he's going to the Cowboys. Earl Thomas is going to be on the Dallas Cowboys. And I think there's a part of Stephen Jones that always thought he was too. Which is why, one, they didn't invest any draft capital in the free safety position. They didn't invest any draft capital in the safety position at all. And Joe Deasy says, I say a fourth. That'd be hilarious, right? So John Schneider picks up the phone. He's like, we wanted a 1. At this point, we'll settle for a 2. And Steven's like, well, how about a fourth? How about maybe 2/4? That's what we'll do. We'll do 2/4. Otherwise, good luck. Good luck finding better value for him. Although, again, I think if the Seahawks want to trade him, they can trade him. There are a lot of teams that would want him. Whether or not they trade him to the Cowboys, where he wants to go, is a different story altogether. Now, again, that's why I think if you're the Cowboys, it's not like you pick up and you lowball. I think you stay with a third-round pick, which is most likely what you're going to be able to get in the open market for him from other teams as well. By the way, post your comments no matter where you're watching. I'm on Big Game James's page. I'm on Joe Boo's page. Ari Temkin Radio, Law Nation, Silver and Blue Nation, the Dallas Prospect. All of those pages also on Phantom. We're also broadcasting live on Twitch and on YouTube. So no matter where you are, make sure to post your comments and I will get to them. All right, let's see. Let's just cycle through all the pages. But yeah, I mean, I think Earl Thomas is coming to the Cowboys because I think it's where he's wanted to be all along, obviously. And I said throughout the entire offseason, if Earl Thomas continues to hold up his end of the bargain, which is he says he's going to hold out. So I mean, if he continues to hold out, if he actually does hold out, then he will be with the Cowboys, and that's what we're seeing. He didn't go to OTAs, which were voluntary the entire offseason so far, the last 3 weeks. Now he's saying that he's not going to go to a mandatory minicamp, which is this week, which means my guess he's going to get fined for that. Then they're going to, a month and a half later, they're going to show up for training camp. He says he's not going to be there. Why would you not show up for voluntary minicamp and then go ahead and show up for training camp? So he's going to continue to hold out, which to me says either Seattle is going to continue to fine him and they're okay with having a unhappy player on their roster, or they can trade him, get $8.5 million back in cap relief, not have to deal with a guy that's upset to be there, and potentially end up picking up compensation for it as well. And pretty decent compensation, too, if you're talking about a third-round pick or a couple of third-round picks or a fourth-round pick. Marcy Shabazz on the Silver and Blue Nation page says, every lane is opening for Thomas to come to the Cowboys. That's exactly right. That is exactly right. So remember, the Cowboys didn't invest any of their draft capital in safety. They didn't, and I mean, look at where they are at safety. They've got Jeff Heath at strong safety, which they feel pretty good about, and then they moved Byron Jones from free safety back to corner. So they've got the presumptive starter right now at free safety for the Cowboys is Xavier Woods, which Chris Richard and the Cowboys have spoken very highly of throughout this offseason, but that's, to me, it's always been in the back of their minds. Yeah, if they had to, they could go with Xavier Woods at free safety to start the year, but that they would want that's the spot for Earl Thomas. And for me, this is like Charles Haley. Like I don't want to get too crazy into this, but look at the Cowboys. They had a really young, up-and-coming roster. And yes, Marcy, the Cowboys have enough cap space right now to fit the money in to make it work for Earl Thomas. So it works. It works in every capacity. It's clear that they didn't feel like investing more into the free safety position. They probably felt like they'd have a good shot at getting Earl Thomas. Now that they have the necessary cap in order to make it happen, cap space to make it happen, they can do it. So everything is opening for Earl Thomas to the Cowboys. And if you go back and look at the dynasty in the 90s, God, I'm starting to sound crazy because, Jason Garrett's still their head coach. But they had a really young team, and they added Charles Haley. It was like the perfect addition, right? Like, Charles Haley was the guy that was that veteran that could come in and provide some leadership. He was at this total position of need for this team. And it was like the perfect piece at the perfect time. The parallel here is Earl Thomas. A young team, a young roster. Oldest player on offense is 27. Oldest player on defense is Sean Lee. They have leadership. But man, how about a guy that's been on a winner? A guy that's won a Super Bowl? Like a Charles Haley, a guy that has won and been at the pinnacle of the sport. A guy that's always been a known leader at a position of glaring need for this team at free safety. I mean, it's like Christmas in June for the Dallas Cowboys. It's the parallel I see is with like Charles Haley, with a young roster and adding a guy like Earl Thomas, a veteran who's been at the mountaintop, that provides great leadership, that wants to be with the Cowboys. I mean, it just seems absolutely perfect. It's all coming together for the Cowboys, and that's Like, the one thing is, I agree with the Cowboys' approach in free agency, and I agree with, for the most part, Stephen Jones and their approach, and they're going to retain their own guys. They want to draft and develop. They don't want to go out in free agency and spend a ton of money. I agree with it. I think, to a certain degree, you have to go and shore up some of your holes in free agency. But, man, if they go and get Earl Thomas, I mean, you're talking about a home run offseason. You're talking about a home run offseason. Javier Castillo on the Joe Boo page says, would Dallas give him a long-term deal, still have to pay Dak and Zeke? Now, here's the thing, right? So we've said, Earl Thomas says he wants a long-term deal to stay with Seattle. He's looking for that long-term security. He's already said he wants to play for the Cowboys. I don't know if those two things are true. Like, I don't know is it that he wants a long-term deal to stay in Seattle, or that he'd be more willing, that he wants to play for the Cowboys and he'd be more willing to sort of, not get a long-term deal but to be with the Cowboys. And maybe my wishful thinking on this is, look, you pay him, he comes and plays in the last year of his deal now, and then they talk in the offseason. But, the Cowboys obviously are at a crossroads now where, they're going to have to make a decision on Dak Prescott after this season. And my assumption is they're going to make a decision to make him one of the highest paid players in the league, because that's just the nature of being a successful quarterback. But that deal won't kick in until the following year. So he'd play out the final year of his rookie deal next season. So it gives them a little bit of breathing room between the Dak and Zeke deals, which obviously the fifth-year deal, I don't know, that's different. Is it to where it would happen? So, look, it would work this year from a money standpoint. I don't know the particulars of where Earl Thomas wants a long-term deal to stay in Seattle or to come to Dallas. Maybe that's the case. It's obvious, though, and he's made it abundantly clear he wants to play for the Cowboys, that he wants to come to Dallas. So I just think he'd probably be more willing to play out this year and then renegotiate after this year. But maybe not. Maybe he comes to the Cowboys and he's upset. He still wants a long-term deal, and obviously that would then be up to the discretion of the Cowboys to be able to make that happen. But it's obvious he wants to play for the Cowboys. My guess is he wants the security if he's going to have to stay in Seattle, but he doesn't want to be a part of the rebuild that Seattle has going on right now. And it's obvious their defense is not going to be as good as it's been, so he'd like to go somewhere like Dallas where the defense is young, up and coming, and boy, talk about having a great leader at the back end of their secondary. He's just the perfect missing piece for the Dallas Cowboys. The perfect missing piece for the Dallas Cowboys. Mark Sampson says, come to Dallas, it makes sense, Mr. Thomas. By the way, hit the share button. Make sure to post your comments no matter where you're watching. Just going around and around to the different pages that I'm on. Law Nation page. Justin Simmons says, couldn't it be that him saying he wants to play for the Cowboys was that to drive up his price? Everyone says they want to play for us. That's interesting because the Cowboys are one of the few, and you're right. I mean, the Cowboys are one of the few teams in the NFL that they get players like this that want to play for them. I mean, the Cowboys have the highest valuation of any NFL team, of any team in pro sports. They have the most They have the most fans coast to coast. I mean, there's a absurd amount of fans for the Cowboys. LeBron James is a Cowboys fan. I mean, there's a reason why they're called America's team. Truthfully. So Justin Simmons is basically saying, like, maybe he doesn't want the long-term deal. He just wants to play with the Cowboys, and part of it is he just wants out with Seattle, and so he's saying he wants a long-term deal as a reason for why he's holding out. I mean, I think there's legitimacy to wanting a long-term deal because, again, Seattle is rebuilding. They've traded away the majority of their great players on defense and in pursuit of younger players. They're trying to rebuild because before they made it work where they could spend more money on their defense because it was offset by a cheap young quarterback. Well, now they have to do the opposite. They have to pay Russell Wilson, so they can't be paying a bunch of players on defense. So they had to rebuild through the draft on defense. So Earl Thomas makes no sense on the Seahawks right now. So maybe Earl Thomas is saying, I want a long-term deal. One, knowing he's not going to get it from Seattle because that's not part of their plan right now. And two, because if he's going to stay on to be part of this rebuild, he needs more security than playing out this year on the last year of his deal at $10 million. So, I think from a Cowboys standpoint, obviously the Cowboys are going to want to know Obviously, the Cowboys are going to want to know before they trade for him, if they trade for him, if he's going to want, a long-term deal. or if it was just a thing that he'd want to stay with Seattle. I mean, obviously he wants to get paid, and he'll make $10 million this year, but he wants the long-term security. So maybe he goes to Dallas. He plays last year on his former 4-year deal, and he goes and proves his worth and proves that he still has it, even at 29. Still proves just how good he can be from a leadership standpoint, and proves that great value, which is something that I think he will absolutely bring to the table. I think it's happening, Cowboys fans. I think Earl Thomas is going to be a member of the Dallas Cowboys. I think the Cowboys have been planning for it. That's why they didn't invest any draft capital. That's why they didn't go out and do much to address their need at safety. Here's the thing. The Cowboys have how many corners? This is what's amazing. Think about this from the Cowboys are planning this standpoint. This is the best example I can give you for how I know the Cowboys have been planning this the entire time. So they have Chidobe Awuzie. They have Jordan Lewis. They have Anthony Brown. They have Xavier Woods. Who am I missing, guys? Help me out here. What are the other Cowboys corners that I'm missing here? I mean, they have no shortage of corners. Like, they have a ton of corners. So why would they then take... So if they have a ton of corners, but they obviously need help at the safety position, because they don't have numbers at safety, right? So why would they take a guy that's not played the last 2 years in Byron Jones at free safety and then move him back to corner? You already have a lot of corners. You don't have much at safety as far as numbers. So why would you take a guy that's been playing safety the last couple of years and then move into corner where you already have a ton of players? Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? It does, unless you feel like you're going to end up getting Earl Thomas in free agency. So, and then on top of that, it's not like they did anything to adjust to the lack of numbers they had at safety. That's the most amazing thing here is, it's not like they went out and addressed it in the draft. They didn't draft anybody at safety. They basically said, hey, a guy that we drafted last year that hasn't played safety, Xavier Woods, he's our starting free safety. You think the Cowboys feel comfortable having a championship-level defense with Xavier Woods at free safety? And that's, again, I'm not knocking Xavier Woods. I'm simply saying the Cowboys all along thought they were getting Earl Thomas because they, like myself, thought if Earl Thomas wants to play for the Cowboys, says he's going to hold out, does hold out, then the Seahawks' hand is going to be forced, and especially when they've had a fire sale this entire offseason, and they've gotten rid of the majority of their guys on big deals on defense. Jordan Lewis, Cheeto, Byron Jones. Those are the guys like Oscar Gomez and Dale Bailey. Those are the guys I got. Who am I missing? Anthony Brown. Who am I missing? I mean, they have a lot. The point is they had pretty good numbers along their cornerback group. Byron Jones, Brown. I'm missing some guys, but it's okay. So I mean, the point is that if they had numbers at the cornerback position, and then even with the numbers, they transition Byron Jones from safety over to corner. Like, if they have a lot of corners, and then they move a guy at safety where they didn't have a lot of depth to corner, don't you think then they're planning on bringing somebody else in at free safety? I know Chris Richard was saying we like what we have with their young players. But remember, Chris Richard, or rather Sanjay Lal, when he was first hired as the wide receivers coach, talked glowingly about Dez Bryant. How much you love Dez? I mean, that's just the nature of the beast when you're a coach on a roster that has certain guys in your roster. Marcy Shabazz on the Silver and Blue Nation page says Chris Richard, to me, will be the difference maker. He'll bring that edge to the team that's always been missing. Yeah, but here's the difference, and I agree with that. I think Chris Richard's a great hire. Anybody you talk to, again, Broadus from DallasCowboys.com will be my guest on this Friday's episode for Cowboys Beat, so go check it out wherever you download podcasts. Go subscribe to the podcast. But and Brian Broadus said the best off-season acquisition for the Cowboys has been Chris Richard. But here's the thing. When you're on the sideline, you can only do so much. If you have a guy like Earl Thomas, that Chris Richard has been with Earl Thomas basically his entire career, as long as Pete Carroll's been the head coach in Seattle. Chris Richard came over with Pete Carroll when he took over in Seattle. So, I mean, if there's a guy that you could get that could be a quarterback of the defense that understands the most important principles that Chris Richard wants, that's on the field, it is. I mean, it's a huge victory for the Dallas Cowboys because Chris Richard can only do so much being a coach on the sideline. You got a guy on the field that's doing it, making plays. Oh, it's dynamite. Marcy Shabazz also says, I just got alert that the Martin deal is close to being done. They're going to take some of that cap room. Good point. But again, if they've been planning for it, if they've been basically planning for, and I believe that Stephen Jones has in the back of his mind been planning for Earl Thomas to be a member of the Dallas Cowboys, then they'll be planning for it from a cap standpoint too. By the way, other things to note from Cowboys OTA, Jihad Ward. Pay attention to this guy, guys. Jihad Ward, who is the guy that came over from Oakland in the trade for Ryan Switzer. He was a second-round pick a few years ago, and again, another point that Brian Broaddus made on my podcast, which, again, you can hear on Friday when it comes out, was, yeah, Mark Sampson, exactly. Goosebumps with Richard and Earl Thomas together. Exactly. You've got Richard there to bring the mentality and Thomas there to exemplify it on the field every day. But one of the things that Brian Broaddus told me is sometimes when you have a new coaching staff in an organization, other teams look to go in and look at guys that might be available for cheap. And Jihad Ward is one of those guys. Remember, Will McClay, guys, is brilliant at finding guys off the scrap heap. And Jihad Ward could be that guy. Very athletic. This is a guy that Rod Marinelli had at the Senior Bowl when he coached him. Really liked what he could bring to the table in Marinelli's style of a defense. He didn't really fit with Oakland. So they ship him off for Ryan Switzer. Remember, this is a guy that was a second-round pick, so he's got the tools. They didn't have to pay much for him. They basically were able to trade a late-round pick for Tavon Austin, who they believed could do what Ryan Switzer had been doing for them and probably do it better. And then they end up with Jihad Ward, who could become a major piece for them along their defensive line rotation. The Cowboys have a lot of question marks along their defensive line. I wouldn't get my hopes up on Randy Gregory. He's still waiting to be reinstated. And who knows, so he can't even be with this team until he's reinstated. So don't get your hopes up at all if you're a Cowboy fan about Randy Gregory. By the way, Anthony Mings says they'll get DeMarcus Lawrence done also, which will give them more cap room, potentially, if they do get a long-term deal done with DeMarcus Lawrence before the season starts. But Jihad Ward is a guy that everybody that's watched OTAs has talked glowingly about. Just great athleticism. And I think the Cowboys, they have numbers along their defensive line. So, but there are a lot of question marks. Malik Collins, the foot injury. This is a guy that's had a lot of injuries throughout the course of his career. Charles Tapper is in the same kind of boat. Like, these are two guys, part of the same draft class that came in with a lot of promise that are yet to fulfill that promise. Probably Collins more so than Tapper. Randy Gregory, again, I wouldn't count on Gregory at all until at least he's reinstated. But I mean, DeMarcus Lawrence, David Irving, now you add Jihad Ward to the mix, Coney Ely, they could potentially have a very, very, very active defensive line. And depending on where you fall in the camp of, does a secondary make a defensive line? Does a defensive line make a secondary? I think their corners are going to be really good. Byron Jones played at an all-pro level when he was a corner in the NFL for the Cowboys. Jordan Lewis, I think, is going to be a star. I think Awuzie will be pretty good. Anthony Brown is in a make-it-or-break-it type season for him. So, I mean, they're going to have really good corners. I think Heath is probably underrated strong safety. And if they have Earl Thomas, my God, you're talking about one of the best secondaries in the NFL this year. Which, considering 2 years ago, the Cowboys had one of the worst defenses in the NFL, to go from being that to having one of the best secondaries in the National Football League, that is going to dramatically improve the ability of their pass rush. So, again, I'm part of the camp that believes if you have a dominant defensive line, that helps to make your secondary better. If you've got a dominant secondary, that helps to make your defensive line better. And Jihad Ward is a guy to keep to pay attention to, because he's a guy that seemingly is starting to turn heads in OTAs already. Watch for him in camp too. Mark Sampson, so excited for this season. Me too. All right, this is Showtime right here on Phantom every single day at noon. Make sure to join us every day at noon right here on Phantom. Phantom, the digital sports network of the future, the new world order of sports media. Find us on YouTube, find us on Facebook. I'm actually going on a family vacation to Las Vegas tomorrow, so I will not be on tomorrow. No Showtime tomorrow for sure. As for the rest of the week, though, I'm going to try to find quiet space somewhere that I am, in Vegas, to try and do a show every single day But make sure to follow me on Twitter at RA Sports, ARI Sports, or follow the Phantom page in order to get updates on when I'll be going live. But traditionally, it's 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 12 noon Central, right here on either Facebook at facebook.com/Watch Phantom, on Twitch, find the Watch Phantom page on Twitch, or YouTube, search Watch Phantom on YouTube as well. Again, thank you to everybody who's joining the show today. Appreciate you, Mark Sampson. You're the man. Let's see, other pages to want to make sure. Justin Simmons, Justin Thomas, John Price. Thanks to you guys as well. Thanks to Silver and Blue Nation. Terry Turner says Xavier Woods will be fine at safety. Sure, I'd rather have Earl Thomas at safety, though, and then potentially bet on Xavier Woods being free safety of the future, or have a pretty good rotation with Xavier Woods. But again, I think Earl Thomas is going to be a member of the Dallas Cowboys. I'm excited about it. I think the Cowboys have been planning for it all offseason, for the hope that he would do what he said he was going to do, which is hold out, which he's doing. Make no mistake, Cowboys fans, he is going to be with the Dallas Cowboys. The Seahawks have unloaded all of their talented players on defense. They're rebuilding with young players on defense. They have no use for Earl Thomas. He's going to continue to hold out, and if he does, the market gets worse and worse for Seattle to trade him. They're going to unload him. They're not going to. The Cowboys could have had him this whole off season, but they weren't going to do it for a first or even a second round pick. Nor should they have. They're going to do it for a third, maybe even a couple of thirds. We'll see what happens. But Earl Thomas will be on the Dallas Cowboys. All right, I'm out. Thanks everybody for joining us. And I will not be here tomorrow, but I will be with you later on this week. So make sure to join us later this week. Check my Twitter at RA Sports to find out when I'll be going live again. I'm out.